Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to today's event. I'm Jason Gumpert from msdynamicsworld.com, and I'm pleased to welcome to today's session Mary Miller, Director of Sales and Marketing at ImageTag. She's here to talk to us about AP automation for financial pros using Dynamics SL. As we get started today, please know that we do welcome your feedback during today's event and questions. You can use the Q&A block you should see to the right of the main presentation area. If you don't see that, look for a question mark icon in the upper right, and that should enable it for you. You can enter your questions at any time, and Mary will be leaving time at the end to take those. So without any further delay, I'm going to hand things off to Mary to get us started.
Thanks, Jason, and thanks everybody for taking some time out of your day to learn a little bit more about AP automation for finance pros if you use Dynamics SL. And you know, we've got a lot of companies that we work with that use Dynamics SL specifically in the construction space, in professional services, and you know, different aspects of manufacturing. You know, basically anything that really is core, you know, project accounting type operations. And what we find is that the more you automate, because there's so many different players out in the field, the better control and visibility overall you're going to have, not only within SL, but into the documents that feed, especially the AP automation, the AP workflow, and how automation can help that. But let's first take a look at why you would introduce AP automation or any type of automation within your business. And the reality is that what happens is people go, this is the way that we've always done it, and so we're used to it this way, and gosh, it's slow, and man, it's really painful sometimes, and we have people in the field who have all of these papers stacked up, and they are certainly not in an admin role, and so they're trying to get rid of them and make their lives more efficient, not to mention the accounting and finance team that's in corporate or some other office location has zero visibility into those documents, and so they're really struggling with, how do I get a handle on my process here? So those are some of the things that we hear people really kind of griping about that make them want to do something from an AP automation standpoint. And then the other part of that reality is that, as you're looking at the picture on the screen, paper is expensive. Now, the reality is that the cost of the paper certainly is one aspect of paper being expensive, but there are other factors that also play in that sometimes people don't necessarily realize. For example, every piece of paper that comes into your organization tends to be either copied, scanned, shared, or otherwise, and in some cases printed, scanned back in, printed again within a workflow, up to 10 times. So every piece of paper, every one of the pieces of paper in that box and any others that come into your organization, research shows that it gets reproduced up to 10 times per sheet of paper. Now, the math on that gets expensive. We have customers that have, you know, pallets and pallets and pallets of paper every month delivered to their organization, just like the ones that, excuse me, that you're looking at here. And that adds up to billions over the course of years across the way that your company does business with paper today. Now, that's probably, you know, it's a line item on your budget for office supplies, right? But the reality is of that reproduction and the inefficiency that comes with that reproduction is probably not something that's a line item on your budget. Nonetheless, it's just as important that we take a look at the whole process and why, if a paper-based process lives in our organization, why we need to change it. So certainly as you're building your business case for AP automation or any automation in your business, consider the true cost of paper, and it goes well beyond the actual money that you spent to get that box of reams of paper into your office. So can add up to 31 times the actual cost of the paper. So some other data points and some research that suggests why transform, why go paperless. And if you noticed on the title slide, we said at the header, in addition to making finance pros successful with AP automation, we said, let's go way beyond paperless. Well, here are some of the reasons why. This isn't just about getting rid of the paper. It isn't just about automating the process, for that matter. It's really about making your business more efficient, more effective, more productive, and ultimately more competitive. Because if your business is at a risk for any type of loss, such as the one that you're looking at on the left-hand corner, upper left-hand corner of this screen, you know, you're really putting your business at an unfair advantage to not have access to the documents that today you depend on to run your business. By way of example, that number, 70%. Research shows that 70% of businesses would fail within 3 weeks if they suffered a loss of paper due to fire, flood, or some other natural disaster. And having unfortunately personally been through both of those things, it's twice personally on each and then once in a business setting, neither one of them are anything that anybody looks forward to. And it's so easy to take the that's never going to happen to me scenario. But the reality is it's a risk that's not worth having, especially when you rely so much on the paper that drives your business today. So we have to have a way to digitize and access those documents that are so critical to our business because we don't want to take that risk. Upper right-hand corner, this number, 30%. Again, you probably don't have a line item on your budget for this, but it happens every day. Look around your office. 30 to 40%, and I show the conservative number, 30% here, 30 to 40% of an admin time or finance person's time or HR person's time is spent looking for information. Those documents that are lost in email or filing cabinets or boxes. We have clients who have walls and wall-to-wall file cabinets and storage of just box after box after box. The row's so tight in one of them that you can barely walk down the row between the shelving of just piles and piles of boxes where information is stored. Now, I don't know about you, that's nobody's idea of a good time for finding something in that environment. And not to mention, that office could be used for things like putting people there and having them be productive, but instead it's used for storage of boxes and file cabinets. So it commands a lot of time in order for somebody to dig out the information that they're looking for. In some cases, what if it was misfiled and then they have to, really scramble to find something. So it's a huge time suck to have things stored in paper environments. Lower left-hand corner of your screen, 22%. This represents the percent by which paper grows in an average organization, meaning that within 3 years, roughly, faster if you're a larger organization, but roughly within 3 years, the amount of paper in your business is going to double. Now, add to that the previous two stats that we've just talked about, and unfortunately, that puts a significant amount of pressure to make those documents digital, because having them is great. Being able to find them is a much better situation. And this doesn't even touch the automation. This is just about that going paperless step. So first we want to make sure that we have the paper in digital format, and then we're going to talk about ways that we can automate it and add even further to the efficiency and the productivity within our organization. And then finally, the number in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, $125. This is the cost of a typical misfiled document within an organization. Now, if you have to go back to the source, say a vendor, for example, because many times accounting is the one who gets that phone call. Can I get a status on my payment from the vendor, right? And they're saying, well, let me, check with the person who was supposed to receive that invoice. What department did that invoice come in? And now that person is, spending that 30 to 40% of time already running around the office, calling, emailing, chasing the person who was supposed to have received that document. And if they can't find it, it's been lost, misplaced, not filed correctly, or whatever. Now you have to go back to the source and say, you know what, could you resend that to me? And in addition to the frustration that that vendor experiences, you're also now creating some sort of ill will with your organizations because they need to know that they can trust when they send you something that it's getting to the right person. So $125 is the cost of a misfiled document, and then that cost goes up to $350 to $400 per document if you have to go back and have it physically replaced. And that takes into account all sorts of factors like the timing and the delay and the people that actually have to do the work and the cost of that person and the cost of the process delays that are happening as a result. So lots of factors that play into these numbers and these stats, but certainly things that you want to take into account as you're building your business case for automation and certainly for going paperless. And I think I clicked ahead mistakenly a little bit before, so you probably already saw this, but nobody wants this experience from Office Space that we can probably all remember and relate to from years ago. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be able to find anything in that environment. So certainly we want to take a look at how we can make this type of experience not be a thing, make that go away. So what do we do when you're working with QuickTag? How do we help in that process? Well, at QuickTag, we have an approach of let's capture the documents that are critical to your organization. And this is something that I would encourage you to consider whether you work with QuickTag or anyone in the market really. Capture the documents in your business environment. digitally as early as possible in the process. Why? Well, because the impact for the people that are supposed to be receiving those documents, whether they're your department heads or a project manager who's in the field or corporate accounting and finance or your HR director, whoever is supposed to be receiving those documents, right now is the one who is stressed and burdened with running around the office and chasing documents that might be living on somebody's desk or in somebody's filing cabinet or in somebody's email or whatever. And having digital access to them is the first level of what I'll call stress reduction, kind of think of it as a three-step program. First level of stress reduction and access to that information is simply making it digital. So we have the concept of document capture. We'll talk about that and take a look at it actually in a demo here in just a minute. And then the next thing is integrate. So back to that accounting and finance professional who is right now, in some cases, double or triple entering data because they can't find where it came from to begin with, so they've got to go enter it into the system, then chase the document, and then when they get more information, then they can add that information to the system. I'm exhausted thinking about it, aren't you? So the whole idea of integrating that document capture, now that you have the document digital, integrate it into the core systems that you use to run your business, in this case, Dynamics SL. And then finally, automate that process. The more we can do with automation, once those digital documents come into our system, or if they come in paper, let's make them digital as early as possible in the process, integrate them into our core system, and then automate them. So, for example, I mentioned that construction companies and professional services and those that have remote project managers, but that have a very defined role in the process of managing these documents, might not be physically in the office. So the ability to send them a notification or give them remote access to take their part, to do their role and their job function as it relates to these documents. We'll use invoices as an example here in a moment. But if they can take that action from a remote environment, whether via their laptop or email or a screen, an online web application, that sort of thing, certainly being able to automate review, approval, edit, that sort of thing is going to make the person in the home office job certainly much better because they have now visibility into those documents, and the person in the field doesn't need to chase paper or worry that something's going to get lost or misplaced. So think of one system to automate any business process as a three-step approach. First, capture, make the documents digital. Second, integrate with our core systems such as SL and automate those processes wherever we can remove manual intervention or physical data entry that has to be done multiple times. We want to cut those steps out of the process. So capture, integrate, and automate. We're going to take a look at each one of those steps as I now jump into a brief demonstration of how that works for AP automation in particular, and then we'll talk about some of the other areas that we also can help your organization. But first, we're going to take a look at AP automation and what that experience in particular looks like using QuickTag. So give me 1 second here. I'll switch over to this other monitor. Oh, that looks good. And I'm now going to dive into what we call the SL Professional Client. Now, this is a QuickTag product, and this is where again, we're talking AP automation, so this is where invoices are now going to begin. So instead of coming into the office every day to a stack of papers or a stack of envelopes, maybe that haven't even been opened, to get your invoices into your system or manually key them in or manually run them from one person to the next to get approval or find out what project an invoice was for, by way of example, we're now going to have all of them come in straight to the QuickTag work queue in what we call the SL Pro Client. Now, we call it the SL Pro Client because it's designed specifically for the accounting and finance team. Good guess. And so the reason for that is that it's designed to function and look and feel and behave much like SL, in some cases even a step up from what SL does for you. But we'll have all of those invoices come into what we call your work queue here. So you see that I've got several invoices. I have a list on the left-hand side. Let me just take a quick step back so that you see what the login experience looks like. When you first log in, you see immediately how many things as an accounting professional you need to tag. Now, I used to be an AP manager, and I would come into that stack of papers every day and the envelopes that needed to be opened, and I would pull out the invoices, and I would manually key in the data, and then I would wait for somebody to tell me it was approved and give me if there was any adjustment to the GL codes or any project codes or anything like that. And it became a very, I was the nagging person because now I'm chasing somebody for something that they really don't have time to do. This is not their day job. It's my day job. It might be your day job, but the person responsible for approving this, it's probably not their day job. So what we're going to do is make it super easy for them to give us the input that we need and to facilitate sending an invoice around for approval. So we have this concept of tagging. These are invoices that have been emailed in. Remember, we want them to be digital as early as possible in the process. So what I've done is I've taught all of my vendors, hey, listen, if you want to have me have visibility into what you're sending me, the invoices you're sending me, and if you want me to be able to pay you faster, because I have this visibility and control, it would really serve you well to email these invoices straight into a common email address, what we call a work queue here in the SL Pro client. You can see I have this list on the left of all of my invoices, and then the image displays on the right-hand side. So I can see instantly that, oh, you know what, graphic design, they've been chasing me for a week. I really got to get this invoice paid. Next month, hopefully they'll email it in first right away. They can certainly be scanned in or uploaded, and lots of different ways to get them into the system. But in the concept of getting them digital as early as possible in the process, we encourage you to have your vendors email them straight in to QuickTag. So this is the QuickTag work queue. Now, what I'm going to do with this invoice as the AP person is make a decision about the type of workflow that this particular document needs to travel upon and get completed so that I can have an approved invoice, thereby creating a voucher and adjustment entry inside of SL. So we're going to take this as a project invoice because this logo creation was part of a marketing redesign project that we're working on. And so as soon as I select that as my workflow, I am brought to an experience, and this goes back to the why we call it the SL Pro client and how it looks, functions, feels, and behaves just like SL. You can see on this layout that every field, every lookup, every function is exactly like the voucher and adjustment entry screen in SL. That's obviously by design because we want this to be easy. We have customers tell us that they started using it and there was very little training required even because you're used to this flow, you know this layout. So the first thing that I do, of course, is check my company ID. In this case, I have only one, so that's easy. If I had multiple SL companies, I could simply select those from the dropdown. Now, that company ID selection drives all of the rest of the availability to me for this particular invoice. The vendor lookup, everything directly connected to SL so that the process is going to be very easy for me to find that information. So I had to do one piece of data lookup to validate the vendor, and then I come over here and I copy and paste the invoice number. Now, of course, we have a dupe check, so I'm going to go ahead and put in today's date to make it unique. And then I'm going to grab the amount, and that's it. I could, again, copy and paste this or enter it. So I come down to my line item, and you can see that I've got an invoice line item here of 1, and the invoice unit price is $25,000. Now, I don't have to do anything else with this invoice because it's now, whoops, unit of measure each. Sorry, talking and typing. I need to work on that. This invoice has now been entered. Now, if I know that we do this project, we receive this invoice for multiple types of projects that are recurring, I'm likely going to save this as a template. The value in that is when I come back to my future invoices, the next time I receive an invoice from Graphic Design Institute, I'm not going to have to do any data entry other than the invoice number and date, which of course you would expect to be unique because every invoice number is going to be unique. And the date, of course, is going to be changed. It's probably going to be next month's project or next quarter's or whatever. So all of that information populates. Even the line item detail would continue to persist here and be available for me. So I can save this as a template. And it's going to ask me when I submit it to give it a name. Now, we're building a workflow history here as well. It's taking, of course, 10 times longer to do this because I'm explaining every step. But normally, the AP person, I'm looking at this invoice, I selected the vendor, I put in the line item, I'm done. There's very little thought that I need to put into the next step of that. I'm building a workflow history though, and it's telling me that the date timestamp is that it's waiting for me to tag it, and now I've done that step. So we can go ahead and submit it. It's going to ask me to give it a template name. I'm going to put graphic design logo, so that I know that that's the template that I might want to use in the future. And again, then all of the information is going to populate. Now, we selected this as a project invoice. That's because it's associated with a standard project that is being managed by somebody out in the field, and so they need to now have the next step in this process. So the next step is that that person out in the field, let's say I'm on my tablet or I'm on my laptop, or I get an email notification that says, hey, you've got this new invoice, you need to do something with it. So I come into my online experience for QuickTech, and I do this on my tablet all the time, or my mini iPad or my laptop or whatever, so that I can see all the invoices that are waiting for me to do something. So now accounting is done with their job. They're on to the next invoice. Now I'm the project manager out in the field, and so I receive a notification that says, hey, you've got an invoice. There's my email notification right there. Of course, we'll take a look at that in a moment. But now I can see in my online experience that I need to do something with this invoice. I click on it, it displays on the right-hand side, and I click on the little pencil to get the edit step. Now I can see here that the edit is required at the line item level, so I'm going to do a quick project lookup, and I know that this is sales and marketing consulting because it was graphic design, and I'm the one that's responsible for this project because I'm the one who's handling it in the field. So of course I've got a lot of detail there, but what I'm really concerned about is the project and the task. So as the project manager, I don't need to go search for this invoice. I don't need to call accounting to say, hey, are you going to send it to me in email? Do you need any other information for me? It's done, and it's disappeared now out of my work queue. So accounting did their job. QuickTag then routed this invoice to the project manager in the field. They did a couple of little edit steps to tell accounting and whoever the final approval is responsible for it that this is the project and the task that this particular invoice was associated with and should be coded to. And so then they're done and they're back to their day job. So the next step in this workflow is that it goes to the CFO for approval. Now, your organization might have one or many levels of approval, and we can accommodate an unlimited number of approvals in the series of workflow. Now, sometimes people want to do that based on dollar amount. Sometimes people do that based on project or vendor. There's a lot of different criteria. The most frequent scenario we see is by dollar amount. And the reason for that is that there's typically approval authorities. Maybe as the AP manager, I have the ability to approve something up to, $1,000 or $5,000. And then maybe a VP has to approve anything over 5,000 but less than 50, and everything over 50 has to go to the CFO. Now, in our situation, we demonstrate that you can have these different levels of workflow based on any one of those criteria. However, in this case, we send all of ours to the CFO for approval so that you can see what that final experience step looks like and feels like. Now, let's take a look at email, since I mentioned that we were getting those email notifications along the way. As the project manager, I received this email that says, hey, you've got this invoice to do something with. It just tells me in the subject line, edit is required here. So I get all of the detail from accounting, which is great. It tells me exactly the information that they've entered, but I could see that the project and task detail is left out. I can, of course, view the attachment to see what the actual invoice is. If I need to go, of course, that's the logo design. So I need to code that to the marketing project that's related to this consulting gig that I'm working on. So that tells me that I need to log in to QuickTag and take the action of the edits that we just completed. Once I'm done with that, the invoice moved on, as I mentioned, to the CFO for approval. So now as the CFO, I get this email, and it has all of the information because it's been through the accounting step to do that initial entry and validation. It's been through the project manager's step of giving me all of the project and task detail, and now I just need to approve or reject. And of course, I can again view the attachment to understand what this invoice was for. So I can close that. It's taken a second to think about that. I can approve or reject. If I approve, it's going to create a reply email, put the content in there, and all I do is hit send. If I reject, I need to click the button to reject, and of course, it's going to tell me to give comments. Because if I'm sending this back to AP, they need to know what was wrong, like, oh, that wasn't the right project, or he needed to add some additional comments, or this needs to be split, or something like that. So lots of different options for handling the workflow and the comments and the approval routing for that. Now, in our experience, we're going to come back to the QuickTag web client, which is responsive design, any browser, any device, that kind of thing. So it's real easy, regardless of what your role is or where you physically are. If you're a CFO, or whoever your final approval is travels quite a bit, and they get this email notification on their phone, they might like the, just approve, reject. If they're the CFO who, how I describe is, feet behind the desk most of the time, and they go through this process once or twice a week, maybe right before they cut check batches, then they may prefer the web experience to be able to go through and quickly look at these and see what they need to approve. I'm clicking pretty quickly, but you can see that all of the invoices come up very easily for me to view on the right-hand side and then get all of this detail on the left. Now, the other advantage of this is I can see who did what. Remember, we've started building a workflow, and Mary did the initial tag step, and then Mary, department manager / project manager in this case, did the editing, told us what project and task this invoice should be coded to, and now Mary CFO is being asked to approve it. So that status is what's currently pending. Now, again, I can approve or reject from here, or I could delegate. I could say, maybe this is supposed to be in somebody else's budget, or was supposed to come, be assigned to multiple projects, and I could have that done via delegation here, so that they could take that next step of approval instead of me. In our case, we're going to go ahead and approve it and say OK to pay and click approve. I could put comments there or not. When I approve, they're optional. They're only required when we reject. And then I'm on to the next thing in my list as the CFO. But what QuickTag has done so far is sent this invoice via the initial email into the queue of the accounting person. They took the initial step of doing a little bit of data entry and some data validation, right? They picked the company and the vendor and put in the amount. And then they routed it to, QuickTag routed it to, upon submit, to the project manager. Now, some people want to be able to choose from a drop-down for project managers, department manager, budget owner, whoever it is that should have that next step. And so that can be a configuration that sometimes people prefer. So then that invoice can be routed to whoever it is that needs to do that edit step, or in some cases, it's the first level of approval. We work with you to determine your workflow, so we make sure to adhere to your business processes in that. And once you have all of those, sort of edit and review steps done, it comes to your final level of approval, whereby whether that's the CFO or whoever is responsible for that does their check, approve. They do their quick glance, and once they approve, it goes, those invoices then QuickTag routes them straight into SL. And so now I'm going to jump over into an environment that's going to be very near and dear and familiar to most of you on the phone. And I come straight into the voucher and adjustment entry, and this is where the QuickTag work queue comes to life for the final step of the workflow creation, because only invoices that have gone through the entire route of approval based on your business process will come to the work queue here in SL. So we click on that, and it's going to give us this list. You can see I've got a few things here. Of course, I could select multiple or just one, depending on how I'm going to create my batches. I click on the top line, and I can see the line item down here below. Here's the one that we're working with. CFO said it was okay to pay. And I can hover and get all of this detail about this particular invoice. I can right-click and view the document because I want to have that final look of control. You can do that or not. As people get more comfortable, they tend to use less and less of the upfront features because they know that this invoice has gone through all of the appropriate approval before it even got here. But of course, I can see the header level information up here at the top. And then I can see the line item detail down here, including, of course, the project and task information that the project manager entered in step 2 of our process. So we're just going to grab the invoice that we're working with here and go ahead and create the voucher and adjustment entry. We'll put it into a new batch, and QuickTag is going to tell us what batch number it gets assigned to and the reference number associated with that. So we'll say OK there, 425 and 566. We'll close this. And now when we come over to our batches, it's going to be the one at the top of the list, of course, and it automatically creates the voucher and adjustment entry along with all of the associated line item detail. And of course, I could view that document just like we did a moment ago. Now, let's assume that at its core, you needed to say, okay, well, now I've got some additional documents I need to add to this transaction. This is entirely optional, but you will have this tag and view option, these tag and view buttons, on 33 different screens in SL out of the box. So let's take a quick flashback down memory lane from 30 minutes ago when I mentioned the whole story of capturing the documents, making them digital, making them accessible to the people who are using this system. So when you use QuickTag to capture documents as our core document management platform, you can do that across 33 different screens with this Tag and View button, even if you don't have workflow in place. So we created this voucher and adjustment entry by virtue of an AP automation workflow, whereby AP did their job, project manager did their job, CFO did their job by approving, and then this transaction was created. Let's say you were still doing that creation of voucher and adjustment or any other type of transactions manually, but you still needed to associate some additional documents. Or in our case, we've completed this workflow. This transaction is now created, but I need to add maybe a packing slip or some other documentation to this particular record now that it's in SL. So we make that part very easy as well. Let's just say that we need to grab some documentation here. We'll go ahead and put the, we'll just throw it over there as a PO invoice. And now we're done with that. We're done with that transaction because we've added additional documents to it. So you can do that as many times as you need to build relationships between additional documents and your transactions in SL. Now, in a second here, we're going to take a step out of SL and take a look at the other aspects of how you can access documents in QuickTag, even for your non-SL users, because that's sometimes really important for people to be able to find things. However, inside of SL, as I mentioned, you can tag and view documents across 33 different screens right inside of SL. When people then need to find those documents, they're not physically being stored in SL. They're related to these transactions in SL, but they're searchable and retrievable and shareable, if that's a word, in QuickTag. Now, had this been a PO-based invoice, we would have looked the PO number up in the Pro client in the SL Pro client and checked the receipt number and done all of that. And it would route very much the same way if, in fact, that's the workflow associated with your PO invoices. If not, those could be routed differently. But if it was a PO-based invoice, we have that real-time lookup into the PO number and the receipt number from the SL Pro client as well. So we're going to go ahead and save this transaction and move back to QuickTag to just kind of take a look at other things that you might need to do to associate documents, because once there is once you've gone through that AP automation workflow, the next step, and you'd be amazed how many times we hear this, maybe you can relate, is that we go through all this process digitally and the invoices are now captured, and then it comes time to cut the checks or make the payments to those vendors. And what we often hear is, yeah, we get to that point, and then we go in and we print the invoices. Again, remember, every document that comes into your organization, printed, shared, or scanned and copied up to 10 times. Here's one example of that. Time to cut the checks, and they go and they print the invoices that they've routed digitally through the process for approval. And so we have a solution for that as well, such that before you go to print the checks, we can give you a visibility into the pre-check register so that you can see all of the checks and invoices related to those checks before they get printed, and they would route for approval much like the invoices do here. So let's then also say that you're in QuickTag and you need to associate additional documents with a given invoice or other document that already lives in QuickTag. Let's take a look at this one, for example. I have 5 different line items here, and then I've got another multi-page document that I have associated with this. Let's see how that happens. So if I'm looking at, this is of course my task queue. I could do this from here. I could do this from a QuickTag drawer, lots of different places to take a look at that. But let's just say that this is a document that I need to be that I need to have as what we call a main document. So I've selected this document, and now I want to say this is a main document. This is an extension, by the way, of what you get. Again, it comes out of the box, but it's an extension of how you can manage your documents digitally in addition to the AP automation workflow that we just walked through together. So let's say that's a main document, and then I've got this related document over here that's also for this vendor, and I can select it as a supporting document, or of course, I could upload a supporting document, as you just saw, as an option there. And then I just click submit, and we call this the link tray. I click submit, and now I have successfully created a link between those two documents. Remember a moment ago, that little bubble said 2. Now it says 3. So you can see the additional document that was added to that relationship. And people use this for invoices, for vendor cards. They use it for W-9s to be associated with vendors. They use it for contract extension. They use it for packing slips associated to an invoice. Just like we added that document inside of SL by tagging a new document, you can do the same thing here inside of QuickTag, especially if you've got non-SL users that need access to additional information and also have additional documents that they need to associate with documents or transactions that already live inside of QuickTag. So let's take a look at what that structure looks like. So remember, as I mentioned, out of the gate, QuickTag comes with the attachment to 33 different drawers inside of QuickTag that relate to 33 different forms inside of SL. So let's come over to our Mary experience where we have kind of the full access to that, and I'll show you what that experience looks like. So the minute we connect QuickTag to your SL interface, we create those 33 corresponding drawers inside of QuickTag that match to the 33 different screens that we automatically connect to out of the box. So for example, bill of materials, customer maintenance, employee records, invoice memos, manual check payment entry, all these sorts of things. And of course, vendor maintenance, as I mentioned, common area for people to put in contracts, W-9s, and that sort of thing. And then voucher and adjustment entry. This one's going to take a second to think about because that's where we put most of the invoices, most of the documents that we route through workflow. But having that ability to access, to add, to manage documents across all of those other what we call digital drawers that relate to the screens in SL is just an added benefit. Make the documents digital as early as possible, associate them with the types of records or transactions inside of SL, and make them searchable, sortable, viewable, findable, shareable, all of those things inside of QuickTag for your non-SL users. And of course, they could export this, save it as Excel, CSV, for, export to other, so if you need to share it with other people across your organization or to a an additional reporting or analytics tool or anything like that. So capture the document, make them digital, integrate directly with SL across 33 different screens out of the box, and then automate that approval process as much as possible from person to person to person throughout your organization with as many levels of approval as is required, and then finally have those transactions created and managed inside of SL using QuickTag. So that's the story for AP automation there. Now I'm going to come back to our conversation here for a moment and just share this other screen with you again. We'll come back over to this one and just kind of talk about some additional ways that people do use QuickTag outside of what we've just taken a look at together for AP automation. Now, I mentioned there's 33 different screens that are automatically attached to. The beautiful thing about that is that even though you have access to those documents inside of SL, they are stored in QuickTag. So we're not using any QuickTag or any SL resources or putting anything in the SL database. They live next to each other, but they do not intermingle, so to speak. We have built the SL Pro client to be exactly like the SL experience, so training is minimal. The ability to switch between companies even. People find that to be really time-saving because in the SL world, they have to log in and log out of every company that they're working in. But using QuickTag, they can simply just select whichever company they're processing the invoice for and toggle right there. And as soon as you select that new company, then the new vendor detail and everything associated with it inside of SL becomes visible for you. Certainly the ability to find things. So go back to that scenario that we talked about. Vendor calls and says, hey, where's my payment? Not only do you not know where the payment is, you probably don't know yet where the invoice is. Now you have access to do a quick search and say, oh, it's waiting for the project manager to approve. So it makes it very simple for you to have that visibility and control so that you can certainly see documents within one click and within a simple search experience. And the line item level, as I mentioned, whether this is PO or non-PO, you can have all of the information at a glance, SL experience, and submit those from the AP work queue that looks and feels just like SL. And so to kind of summarize that, what we find especially helpful if you are the type of organization, and most companies that we work with are, they also have this final step of audit. Probably you just came out of it. Maybe you're still dealing with it. This time of year is very common for that. When you have all of this workflow and that audit trail history, workflow history that we looked at together, you then have the ability to have one-click view of that. So this visibility, this screen cap down at the bottom, audit trail captures every step. When auditors come in for their every 6-month, annual, whatever your frequency is, you can give them a temporary access to QuickTag, or you can just sit them right next to you in accounting, whoever needs to look up this information. They come in with a list of checks or a list of dollar amounts or a list of vendors, whatever the case may be. You can do that search right inside of QuickTag, show them the invoice, show them the audit trail, who did what when, just like this display down here, and when it was finally entered into the ERP system. So you're really showing them every step, the capture, the integrate, and the automation functions that you have now applied by having an AP automation workflow in place, as well as any additional supporting documentation, related files, that sort of thing, like we just took a look at together inside of QuickTag. So it's very easy for them to see. We have people tell us that audits used to take 2-3 months and be very expensive, not just from a cost standpoint, but you have to assign someone on your finance team to go follow these people around or go find the boxes that they need or dig up all of those documents that they need to review as part of their list of requirements. And now we have people tell us that once they started using QuickTag, it's really a matter of they're done in 2 or 3 weeks, and it costs significantly less, and the information is just way easier to find because it's literally at their fingertips. And then just a quick view into the batch that I described. So the payment batch, you can then see, here's the view of the check batch level, the individual checks, and then certainly the invoices that are being paid by each of those checks. Now, as I mentioned, the experience is much like what the CFO has today for the invoices in the online web client for QuickTag. The same thing is true here, where they could approve or reject at the whole batch level, or they could approve or reject at the individual check level. Now, these invoices have already been approved. They've already gone through that process, but you might say, you know what, we have something pending with Beaumont Construction, so we don't really want to pay them yet. So hold that one, but go ahead and pay the rest. So you have that level of approve and reject at both the batch level and the individual check level. And of course, you've got that visibility into the audit trail that I mentioned here before as well. And then searching and finding. So again, when that auditor comes in, you do a couple of quick searches. You maybe are looking for anything related to Beaumont, whether that was in a certain time period or not. We break it down to you for you where it's stored in QuickTag, the drawer that was related to in terms of the SL function, SL module and screen that it was related to, and then of course anything related to those payables, anything related to those vouchers for the workflow drill down. So it's all very simple. One click, search, find, share, and export if needed. So from the moment that the invoice arrives in your organization, we want it to be digital. We want it to route automatically so that we don't have people chasing documents anymore. And we want the approval experience to be very easy for those responsible for doing that. And then finally, we want the people who are living in the SL experience and environment to be able to find those documents as well, drill down into the workflow and audit trail history, and also have access to them both inside of SL and in QuickTag. So some of the other things that I mentioned are that if you have paper-based processes for, let's say, HR or legal or finance or expense management or anything like that, those are common sort of down the hall next step operations or business processes that we work with on companies for on a regular basis. And so often AP is the driver because you look outside of the accounting team and gosh, there's lots of different file cabinets sitting there. We had one company tell us that, you know, those really tall, like 4 or 5 foot tall, 4-drawer, 6 feet wide filing cabinets. We had one company tell us that they used to have 8 of them just managing their accounting documents for the current period. And once they put QuickTag in, now they have none. So it's really a matter of not just the real estate that you gain, of course, without those filing cabinets being there, but the access to those documents is now very simple part of their process. Similar company then also went to onboard independent contractors, onboard employees, process sales orders, and has 30 different documents associated with every contractor they bring into their organization. And they use QuickTag to manage and route and store and build access for those as well. So once you have document management as your core way of thinking, kind of your fundamental capture philosophy within your business, and I'm not saying that's easy because a lot of people are resistant to anything new for that matter, but certainly process change is something that takes time. So, but once they have adopted that mentality of, gosh, if we can make it digital first, there's so many other things that we can do with those documents and to ease the life and ease the stress of our employees. Remember at the beginning, that person's frustrated. They're getting phone calls about information that they have no visibility into. So all sorts of other areas and processes within the business that you can then apply QuickTag to once you have it working in AP automation, or you can start elsewhere. It's just that AP tends to be a common starting point. And some additional benefits that once you have AP automation or other automation, or even just document management into your business, that $125 per document that we're currently spending, and oh, by the way, a document gets lost in most organizations every 12 seconds, so that's not a piece of math that we want to do anytime soon. But when you factor that in to the ROI that you know you're putting together as part of your business case, you need to know those numbers. You need to know that, you know, every document that we have to go back to the source and recreate costs us $350 to $400. So take those things out of the equation and then add in the productivity and the efficiency that the team gains, and certainly that the ROI of the company is going to increase as a result of having automation and control and visibility into the processes that right now probably feel a little bit helpless and out of control. Certainly from an invoice standpoint, all invoices are going to be processed faster, and then they're going to be centrally located, so it's easy for people to find them within SL or within QuickTag. And then the finance managers and the executive team has that visibility. They can certainly see that something is waiting for a project manager or it's waiting for CFO approval. Whatever the case may be, they can drill down and have that visibility. And oh, by the way, QuickTag will send the notifications. Hey, it's been 3 days and we still need approval on this. Can you log in and approve it? Or can you reply and approve it? Or whatever. So remember when I said I was always the bad guy in accounting because I was the person chasing those people for that? We take that out of the equation as well. You don't have to be the bad guy in accounting anymore. Put it all on QuickTag. We'll take it, and we'll send those notifications and remind people that there's work that they need to do in this process. And then, of course, the audit and compliance regulations. In addition to the time, you have that visibility. You're doing what your process and control suggests that you need to do. So having those internal controls easily adhered to is something that's really important when you need to find information at your fingertips. Now, there are a lot of different shapes and sizes of companies. I've mentioned a few examples of industries that are using QuickTag to support their automation and workflow, and certainly strong presence of these use it for AP automation as well. And as you can see from the logos on this slide, I call this the family snapshot. You know, they're all different shapes and sizes and industries, medium-sized companies, large organizations, nationwide, worldwide. The common thing that they all have, and maybe you share this challenge as well, is that they still have a lot of those boxes of paper coming into their organization. They still, even if they digitize step 1 or step 2, they had the challenge of, but how do I avoid printing at this step? And our whole goal is that you would leave this experience knowing that there are ways that you can not hit the print button, as hard as that might be at first, but to not hit the print button so that you're really keeping your documents digital. You make them digital as early in the process and then keep them that way throughout the entire process. So again, lots of different shapes and sizes and industries represented. They all struggle with the same paper challenges that we started out this conversation with. And a few notes about ImageTag. We've been doing this for about 21 years. We were founded in 1997, and certainly as a Microsoft development partner, we were the first to integrate with the Microsoft Dynamics ERP suite. So we cover across GP, SL, NAV, and AX from a document management standpoint, and we automate the routing of documents for approval across lots of different processes, both using those ERP systems as an integration point and as a standalone system for many organizations who want to just have kind of that one central system of record for all of their documents. And we have about 120,000 business users around the globe using QuickTag, and again across all except one continent. So certainly there are lots of examples that you can reach out to as part of the QuickTag community as a resource. And one of the things that people really appreciate about working with us is that our support, our customer support team is all 100% US based, and we're right here in Tempe, Arizona. a great time and place to visit this time of year, I might add. If you're looking for training or some tips, come on out. The sun is shining. It's going to be 90-something today. I apologize if you're in a part of the country that is not experiencing that, but nonetheless, all of our support is located right here in Tempe, Arizona. And as I mentioned, you can automate virtually any process. Some systems are, really good at doing one thing very well, and that's great. But if you want to scale across your organization with the same system and not continue to reinvest a significant amount of money every time, then I would encourage you to look at our platform by which you can use it for many different areas of the business, several examples that we've covered together today. And then finally, I would encourage you to stay connected with us and certainly look us up on the web and via social media channels, and you can find lots of cool tips and tricks and videos and suggestions and industry stats as you're building your business case internally. We're happy to be part of that conversation as well. And if you would like to see a custom tailored demo, we're happy to facilitate that. Certainly just give us a call, shoot us an email, visit us online, and or reach out through this webinar, and we'll follow up with a specific meeting time that we can go through in greater detail so we can understand your business process. We know that processes aren't one size fits all, neither is automation. So we're going to work with you to understand what your requirements are, what your business logic needs to be, so that we can support that every step of the way. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Jason to see if we have some questions to cover.
All right, thank you, Mary. A few questions have come in, and I would just invite anyone else who has any to please answer them now. So the first question that came in fairly early on in the presentation was asking about, well, we have, this person writes, you have multiple project managers. How would the system know which one to send an approval to?
Yep. So we would create an approval drop-down list for you, and you can select the approver unless there's a scenario where, and this is rare, but unless there's a scenario where every invoice from this vendor goes to this project manager. Again, that's a pretty rare situation, but in most cases, we're going to give you that approver drop-down list to basically just pick it based on who the invoice is from and what project it's for. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Where are documents stored? Could it be SharePoint? Could it be a shared drive?
So documents are stored inside of QuickTag. So they're stored in the QuickTag database, which is what makes it easy for them to search and find and share with other people. You can share with anybody who has a QuickTag license, or you can email the file straight out from QuickTag to somebody who maybe just needs something on occasion, but doesn't need to have access to the system. Certainly you could, you can export and archive them to, any number of places, including other network storage and that sort of thing. But as you want to have them for whatever period of retention your initial requirements are, typically people look at 1 to 3 years as where they want to have first level access, and then they can sometimes archive because they need to have things stored for up to 7 years is the most common scenario that we see. But you can store them in the QuickTag database for as long as you need to, and certainly we can help recommend best practices for archiving and moving them to a network storage of some place. So yeah, it's pretty easy to do that.
Are the digitized documents DCAA compliant?
DCAA, sorry, that's not an acronym I'm familiar with. I'll have to check on that.
Okay, and we can put you in touch with the person who asked that.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to have that conversation.
And what about expense reporting and time cards? Can we create additional drawers for them?
Absolutely. In fact, we have a whole separate module that deals with just expense management, whereby as a user, let's say that person is a traveler, not an SL user at all, but let's say that person's a traveler, they take pictures of their receipts with their phone, they submit them to QuickTag, much like the view that we looked at in our task menu, and we can then tag them, give them a little bit of data. This was for this event, this was for this client meeting, whatever. And then QuickTag will build an expense report, route it for approval, much like the invoice workflow that we looked at together. And then it can go into a central repository inside of the QuickTag as well. So it makes that real easy for you to be able to create that association with the payment so that you know who you're going to be paying and how much, and that expense report has already been approved. So yeah, absolutely a module there that is easy to add, whether you do it as workflow or if you just want to put those documents inside of QuickTag in their own drawers, absolutely. You can create new drawers and sites till your heart's content. No extra charge, comes with the platform.
Okay, one final question here, so I'll just make a final call in case anyone has anything further before we conclude. And this question, the person prefaces it by saying they're looking for a Cliff Notes answer, but when closing the AP module, how are invoices that are midstream through a workflow process handled in regards to the period posted? Can QuickTag accrue costs via GL for midstream workflow costs?
So we're going to be accruing them, so to speak. I'm hesitant to use the word accrual because I know what you mean by that, and we're not actually doing it inside of SL, but we're going to keep that invoice in a workflow state that is not yet touching SL. So think of it as until that invoice gets approved, the only thing that probably lives in SL is if there was a purchase order, then that data would be available for you. But once an invoice comes in, we're going to store that, and you can search and total up and run reports and everything inside of QuickTag. But until that invoice is approved, it's not even going to get to SL. So we can certainly help you, build reports if there's different tallies that you need by project or by GL or by other types of account codes inside of QuickTag. But that's an area that we definitely want to have you chat with one of our business analysts so that we could understand what that exact requirement is and help facilitate that in the best way possible. So there's, I think, multiple questions in that probably require a little additional conversation. But yeah, we'd love to have that conversation offline as well.
Okay, well, thanks for the questions, everybody. That does conclude the Q&A. So I think we're able to begin wrapping up here. Mary, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, and to everyone in the audience, we appreciate your input and attending. There's a brief survey that'll pop up after you depart today. Any additional feedback about your experience would be greatly appreciated. It should only take 15 or 20 seconds. With that, we are going to wrap up. That concludes the event. Have a great day, everybody.